The following is a production of Fenix Media. The views expressed do not necessarily represent those of the company or its advertisers and may contain language that's unsuitable for younger listeners.
Welcome to the Dogish podcast, a podcast dedicated to pet parents and the topics, events, and personalities impacting their lives. Today, I am here with my host, Jason Arias of Forever USA. I'm Sylvia West, as usual, Dog Up in This Bitch. Today, we have a really special emergency episode that we just recently taped with Lori Kalef of SPCAI about the ban on the CDC ban on 113 countries.
Can I just say, I'm not excited about this situation, but that I'm really excited that when you and I came together to talk about this show, we wanted to be able to talk about the topics, but we wanted to be able to have an impact too when something was going on, like whether it was the fires or whether, and this is our first opportunity to do that. And so I feel privileged to be able to try and make that impact and connect some dots.
Super honored. So for those of you listening with us today, thank you so much for tuning in and for taking your time to get to the bottom of this. Because I know for Jason and I, we really wanted to get to the bottom of this ban. What is it? What does it mean? I think that we get there with Lori. I think that the way that she describes everything makes it so clear. We have so many solutions. If you're feeling activated and you want to get involved, you need to check the show notes. We have solutions for you. We have opportunities for you to get involved. So let's get into it. Let's educate ourselves. Let's do it.
Off we go. All right, so let's jump into this. I'm fascinated. I feel like there's a ton of stuff that I've only caught bits and pieces of, and then it's gone kind of quiet, except for deep within the animal community. And when I saw your post, it kind of connected a lot of dots for me, Lori, like the impact and what's really going on. So without knowing too much, where do we start on this? Update us on what has happened so that when this goes up, everybody knows what we're talking from, but what is happening with the CDC and animals around the world?
Yeah, thank you. So you'd be surprised how many people also don't know what CDC stands for. So the Center for Disease Control. Very
good. Yeah.
We've all heard a lot about it.
Well, I think this last year we probably have heard a lot about it. On July 14th, I think they made this announcement about 2 weeks ago, as June 15th. They announced that they're going to be putting a ban on the importation of dogs from 113 countries. And the reason for this is because they're afraid of rabies entering into the country. And over the last year, there have been 3 cases reported since 2015.
Okay, so just, all right, hold on. Okay, so 2 things. One, there's how many countries are there? The numbers shift slightly, but it's just over 200 countries across the world. If my geography is clicking in at all, does that sound about right? Somebody Google me, but I think it's 204 or something.
This is the point where you're like, okay, I wish that they gave me the question in advance.
So either way, if I'm even remotely close, so half of the countries have now, the United States is not allowing
195.
Yeah.
Close. See, look at that. I was giving more credit. So over half of the countries, the United States is no longer allowing the imports of dogs or any animals.
Dogs, strictly dogs, and that's from 113 countries.
113.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's quite impactful.
Okay, so it's strictly dogs. And this has nothing to do with COVID. I think that would, even just right now, hearing that, this is for rabies. This has nothing to do with COVID or anything else.
Well, let me backtrack a little bit. So I think everything has to do with COVID right now.
Sure.
The CDC has been quite overwhelmed in the last year, as we all know. And we empathize with them greatly. We know that all their staff has been dedicated to managing and navigating through the pandemic. But part of part of what the pandemic brought was an influx of dogs coming into the country from other countries around the world. So in large numbers from rescue groups and from breeders as well. Now, unfortunately, some of these, because there was a demand for them, I don't know if you had seen what was going on at the beginning of the pandemic. Everybody was getting to stay at home, and shelters in the U.S., across the U.S., started emptying, which was wonderful to see. I won't go down into too many drop-down menus, but unfortunately, now that restrictions are lifting, the shelters are filling up again. They are seeing more animals come in. However, there was a demand for more dogs, and that's both rescue and bred dogs. Now, unfortunately, some of these, I'll call them institutions, organizations, and for-profit companies that breed dogs, to supply the demand, they falsified some documents. And what the CDC was finding out is that there's such a strategy for the importation of dogs, and we can get onto that on how SPCAI International manages that. But it's a process, and there's 3 governing agencies for the importation. So there's the CDC, there's CBP, and there's the USDA. And throughout the last year, there was no unified, streamlined process between the 3 governing organizations. So it's been very difficult to manage the importation of dogs. Again, there's a big increase. So a lot of dogs had to be returned back on flights. And we're talking about coming from China or India, and the dogs landed. They didn't clear customs because their paperwork wasn't up to standard. And these poor dogs had to turn around, not even leave their cage, get right back on the next plane and go back to the country that they originated from. So that has not only, I mean, we don't even have to get onto the stress that causes the animal. A lot of dogs have died in these conditions.
30 plus hours on a plane.
Yeah, I mean, even more, because even before a dog or a cat or any animal gets on a plane, there's a process, and you have to show up at the airport at least 3 to 4 hours in advance. And they're sitting in that cage from that time. And by the time after they clear customs, there could be up to another 2 to 3 hours as well. Pardon me?
I said just getting through customs.
Right. And then, most of them, there's a layover somewhere along the way. So they're in their cage. We always make sure that if we're managing any transports of dogs or cats from overseas, we always have a layover, and we incorporate that into our plan, even if it costs extra, just to give the animal a break overnight, wherever they're going. So this put not just a burden on the CDC and CBP and the USDA, but also the airlines. So what happens is the airlines become responsible for the return of the dogs back into the country. And some of these trips, they don't have return flights right away. So some of these dogs are sitting in customs for 2 to 3 days without being let out of their cage, and then having to get on another flight back. It was absolute tragedy. So there, of course, they're looking at the incidence of rabies and looking at some of the documents that haven't, the organizations or the companies haven't crossed their T's and dotted their I's, and they want to pull the reins back and say, okay, we don't want dogs suffering, or the reputable and good organizations suffering either. Let's pull back and see what we can do to take a pause, because it's a temporary ban. They're looking at about a year, and to see how we could restructure the whole process of importation. I can go on if you'd like.
I feel like it's kind of an overcorrection.
I mean, all the background on this is important. Like there's a lot of this stuff that I'm hearing for the first time. Understanding why it's happening, who it's impacting, all of that kind of stuff, I think is all, and like what that impact is. And so
I don't think that people really understand what it takes to import these animals. I know I follow someone on Instagram who imported a lot of dogs into Florida, and it was like a bunch of golden retrievers that came out of a rescue, and they were on a 22-hour flight, because I don't think what people realize is just like our flights get delayed, just because it's a bunch of animals coming in doesn't mean that there's not delays. There's not weather. They might sit on the tarmac for 3 hours waiting for clearance to fly. Like any number of things can go wrong. You know, it's a process.
It's a process. You know, we run a program called Operation Baghdad Pups Worldwide. So we rescue and reunite dogs and cats befriended by U.S. service members who are deployed in war-torn areas of the world. We operate in about 27 countries right now. And of course, we're a nonprofit organization, so we always need to be raising money to be able to do our work. I think one of the most common comments that we get is, we'll just put the dog on a plane, bring him home. And it's about a 3-month process before we can actually get that dog home, because we really, really are very strict with our, not just the governing country's mandate for exportation, but of course we want to work very closely with the governing agencies in the US as well. And so we are in quite good standing with the CDC. But moving back, you said something about the impact. While we don't, SPCAI International doesn't directly bring home dogs for these shelters and organizations who are working in these 113 countries, we do support their work. And their work is basically TNVRing, which is trap, neuter, vaccinate, and release. And we're talking about mass rabies vaccination clinics around the world where rabies is precedent. And also to be able to educate the public and to be able to treat illness of other sorts, manage cruelty, injury, and whatnot. So what this does is, because these countries, the organizations, the reputable animal welfare organizations who work in these countries and who are our partners, we have about 350 active partners right now around the world.
Wow.
And what this means is they rely almost solely on adoptions overseas. And what this means is that they can't rescue more stray dogs from the streets. They can't help the injured. They can't even do rabies vaccination clinics because all their resources and all their funding is going to go to the animals that they have in their care. So it's also a mental health issue too for the people who have dedicated their entire existence to running these organizations and doing these rescues.
So here's my other question based on location. So, I mean, we're talking about 113 countries, but I don't know what that country list is, but I would assume that all the big ones that we're familiar with, are they all on that list?
Yeah, I mean, the majority, like China, Thailand, Ukraine, Lebanon, Iraq, Syria, all the Middle Eastern countries, a lot of African countries as well, Caribbean countries. There's a list. All you have to do is basically Google CDC dog, and it'll show you the list of 113 countries. But just moving back to what I was getting on, it's not just for the dogs. What happens now, and forgive me, I'm probably going to use this reference many times on this podcast. What happens now is there's a great ripple effect. And there are going to be more dogs in the streets who are not getting spayed and neutered or vaccinated. So there's going to be an even greater overpopulation, and the work that these organizations have been doing is going to be counter-effective, right? And what happens now is there's going to be a wider spread of disease, a wider spread of cruelty, illness, injury, and this is going to become a public health issue for the people living in these countries. Because with more dogs roaming wild on the street, looking for food, not having enough resources, they're going to possibly get more aggressive. There will be a higher rate of transmission of disease, including rabies, which, of course, people can get bitten by these dogs. Mm-hmm. So while we're trying to manage the effectiveness of lowering the probability, or the possibility, I should say, of any rabies coming into the US, what we're doing is we're creating this stream of the possibility of rabies in these countries for people. Mm. And the US is one of the biggest philanthropic countries in the world. And I think this is going to become a public health issue. And last on that note, usually the government in these countries, their immediate response is to do massive poisoning dog culls in many ways, whether it's shooting, poison, or any other sort. We don't even have to get into that. But that in itself is a public health issue too, because you have dogs dying in the street, you have children witnessing this, you have dogs who don't even completely die as well, which sounds so awful. So this is going to have a massive, massive ripple effect on the work that our organizations do. And it's going to become a problem for our organization too, because we obviously want to support our partners in their work, but they're going to need more funding, more support. And it's just going to be this rolling ripple effect for a long time. And even if the ban lifts in the next year, or hopefully if it gets overturned in the next little while, I think we'll feel the effects on it for quite some time, a lot longer than we think.
Allison is perfect. I mean, she'd never tell you that. She's humble and perfect. She likes everyone. She even likes her untidy roommate's weird guinea pig. Allison, wait, are you texting and driving? Allison, no, that's the exact opposite of what I was just saying about you. Why, Allison, why? Texting and driving makes good people look bad. Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org, brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
I'm Paul George of the Indiana Pacers. When I was 6, my days were spent playing basketball. When I was 6, my dream was to make it to the NBA. When I was 6, my mom had a stroke. So I want you to learn to spot a stroke fast. F-A-S-T. F, face drooping. A, arm weakness. S, speech difficulty. T, time to call 911. I'm Paul George. Spot a stroke fast. Visit strokeassociation.org. Brought to you by the American Stroke Association and the Ad Council.
My name is Lola Silvestri, and I'm going to be 95 this year. I was very independent. I fell, and I had to have Meals on Wheels. America, let's do lunch.
1 in 6 seniors faces the threat of hunger, and millions more live in isolation. Drop off a hot meal and say a quick hello. Volunteer for Meals on Wheels by donating your lunch break at americaletsdolunch.org. This message brought to you by Meals on Wheels America and the Ad Council.
I spend a lot of time in the backyard, and I'm the center of attention at summer barbecues. In '96, I made some of the tastiest s'mores. And in '09, it was me, your backyard fire pit, that accidentally started a wildfire when a summer breeze carried one of my embers into some dry brush.
Spark a change, not a wildfire. Visit SmokeyBear.com, brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
My name is Lola Silvestri, and I'm going to be 95 this year. I was very independent. I fell, and I had to have Meals on Wheels. America, let's do lunch.
1 in 6 seniors faces the threat of hunger, and millions more live in isolation. Drop off a hot meal and say a quick hello. Volunteer for Meals on Wheels by donating your lunch break at americaletsdolunch.org. This message brought to you by Meals on Wheels America and the Ad Council.
Hey everyone, let's all stop what we're doing and take a moment. You see, every moment can be kind of special. But they can be loud moments, goofy moments, dorky moments, it doesn't matter. Because every time dads like us take a moment like that to spend with our kids, well, it's pretty momentous. So let's take a moment to make a moment. Call 877-4DAD-411 or visit fatherhood.gov. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
You're listening to Fenix Media. Listen live and explore more great shows at phoenixmedia.us.
So what can we do? I know we're trying to tell as many people about this as possible, but I don't think the CDC is going to sit down and listen to this podcast exactly. Like what kind of impact can we make as a whole to either end this sooner or support, support. So let's just assume that this is happening. How can we support these other locations and these other countries and feel like we're making some kind of impact?
Well, I'm actually going to I'm going to pull up something for you that we can share with your followers. So the way that our organization is always run in any project or any conflict or crisis that we get involved in is we try to find solutions and we try to work with the government. I know that there are a lot of people right now who are very, very upset by this ban and they want to go in there kicking and screaming and, badmouth the CDC. Again, we understand the plight of the CDC. We know that they're overworked. We want to come in and be able to offer solutions and give our assistance. So at this time, there is a solution, and it's quite straightforward. And it's what the UK and Hawaii has been doing, and it's an effective protocol for a number of years right now. And what this is a requirement for all dogs that enter into the United States have a microchip, that they have a rabies serology test. So we know that they have enough immunity against the virus, not just the vaccine, and to have a more streamlined process so that before, and of course, working with a customs broker, but that is something that was suggested to us about 2 years ago. So we have always done that. But what that does is all the paperwork goes to a customs broker. They check it out. They work with the CDC. And before that dog even gets on an airplane, they know that that dog is good and can have entry into the United States.
Should get on the plane.
Yeah. Right now, what's happening is there's a mass confusion. CBP is giving clearance to some. The USDA is saying, well, we need this. Some of them are not getting this. CDC is like, well, how do we do this? So it's just a big mass confusion. But if we can streamline the whole process and have one unified database, microchip the dog before leaving. They already had the rabies serology test at an approved lab by the CDC. Once they get into the United States, dog is scanned. We know that that's the right dog. And it'll be a more costly process for importation, and it'll take a lot longer. But this will ensure the safety and well-being of the dogs and, of course, the population of the United States and the people of the governing country as well.
And right now, there's not an organization that does that. So it sounds like chipping is where it needs to begin, and an organization that will, in some ways, kind of organize that data so that multiple agencies can pull information from that.
Yeah, I mean, that's already been happening. Of course, since the announcement of the ban, a lot of larger organizations have come together. We've been having rolling meetings with some of our partners, our larger partners, internationally, and of course in the United States as well, to come up with a plan. And of course, we want it to be supportive. And we know that it's going to take time. Even if this does come to fruition, we know that it's not an overnight process. This could take months. It could even take up to a year if, for it to come into effect. But
is this something that we could foresee coming, or did it just come out of nowhere?
It came out of nowhere. It came out of a big surprise to every organization. What we have learned is that this was probably in the making for quite some time. There's discussions being had, but I think the biggest surprise was that the amount of time that we had to kind of figure out a new plan, it was less than 30 days. And there have been dogs waiting, who have been vaccinated. And again, all the responsible owners and organizations who've adopted dogs from overseas are waiting for their dogs, and now they can't get their dogs home. So we are urging to be very, very mindful with any messaging to the CDC and respectful. So if anybody who is listening to this would like to write in, we have a message that we have on our website, not on our website, sorry, we probably do have it on our website by now. In social media, Facebook or Instagram, SPCAI International, and you can copy and paste that letter, and you can write your own letter. But we just really, really, really want to remind people to be respectful.
So we're not approaching this with anger, and I totally agree. I'm on board with that. Like, I don't think that somebody at the CDC was going full Cruella de Vil and just like cackling and twiddling their fingers when these decisions had to be made. So let's not treat it as such.
Ultimately, like I said, I do feel like it's an overcorrection on a problem that just needed more of a solution. And at the same time, like, yeah, they are very overwhelmed. We're literally coming off of the heels of a pandemic. Not that this information isn't upsetting, but it sounds like it was kind of a mess. And people who I just get like where my anger falls is not really with the CDC, but with the people who once again take advantage of the fact that this industry is so unregulated. You know, it's those organizations and those like breeders who, or whatever, who it is that's sending in these dogs that don't have the correct documentation, who are trying to get it done quickly, who are trying to skip the line and bend the rules because they can, because it wasn't organized, because it wasn't streamlined, and they could get away with it or try to get away with it, and they made a mess of it. Those are the organizations that I feel like if you want to be angry, like find those people who ruined it for everybody else who was doing it for the best interests of the animals and not necessarily for the best interests of their financial well-being. But unfortunately, it's kind of like the black market of the pet industry is that it is so financially viable and there is so much money in it. And I feel like so many organizations take advantage of that on different levels, from food, which like this year, I think I've seen the most food recalls I've ever seen. I've lost 2 puppies to intestinal torsions from salmonella overgrowth, from bad treats. Like, this is just where we are in this industry. It's really sad. I don't blame the CDC. I think that they're just trying to do the best that they can to make sure that our animals are safe and that the population that we have here, like our personal pets, are safe. There's been, for those who don't know, who like don't work in this industry, like there's been such an influx of disease this year. San Diego just had an outbreak of leptospirosis, which like we don't get on the West Coast. Like, these are real things that are happening. And I think that it's really unfortunate that there are organizations out there that are taking advantage of a broken system and ruined it for everybody who's trying to do the best for these animals. So yeah, if you want to be angry, like be angry, but direct your anger correctly. You know, I think the CDC is doing what they can to protect us and protect our animals that are already here at home.
And the people, of course, too.
And the people. Yes, you can get rabies, humans. It is zoologically transferable, like a lot of diseases. But yes, it can kill you. It's not a good one, you know? So
isn't that the one where you got to get the shot in the stomach?
Yeah, like 10 or something.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a shame. I have to say, like, it's just, I just, you know, when I first read about the ban, I just like, you know, I bowed my head and I was like, because somebody else, just if it's the same story, we've heard it, you know, it's just a few bad apples. They ruined the bunch, you know, and it sucks. It sucks because you're right. We do have animals. I have so many clients who I know in this last year have adopted from China. We interviewed Megan, whose dog is from the Dominican Republic. Like, this is real work that's being lost right now. It's horrifying. It's heartbreaking.
Yeah. I think it was close to 1 million, they said, from those countries that are 1 million dogs that are imported into the United States from these countries. And that's 1 million. That's not just those lives saved. That's like, you can double, triple that because those lives are coming in. That makes more space. That also gives them more funding to be able to do, like I said, the work that they're doing in their country. You know, and it's removing that hope that these organizations, you know, their livelihood, their dream to help animals, it's just been taken away. And I think that it's going to have a really big there's going to be a mental health crisis as well with, again, these reputable organizations who really do their due diligence.
Do you know what percentage of animals that the United States adopts versus the rest of the world?
They say, can you repeat that question again?
So I'm going to make the assumption based on parts of this conversation that the United States brings in more adopted animals than most, if not all, other countries in the world. Mm-hmm. Is that true? So what I'm saying, right? So you've got Asia and you've got the United States and you've got you have other large countries, but the fact that the United States is closing means that 50% of the adopted animals that were typically being exported from another country are no longer. Do you see what I'm saying? I do. Yeah. What percentage of impact would you potentially, and maybe you don't have those numbers. I just figure.
Exact numbers. I did read somewhere on the CDC, one of the news articles of the CDC was interviewed on, that they said that they had said it's about 6% of the dogs coming from these countries, but that's a very, very low number. And I think that
1 million dogs a year.
Right. So the numbers aren't matching up. And they also, I think that percentage is based on the dogs who are already adopted prior to coming into the United States, because a lot of the organizations bring in, they work with
Dogs with Borders
organizations in the United States to find homes for them. So yeah, that's a good question, Jason. I'm not quite sure on the number.
And again, so this is just my ignorance. Is Canada and Mexico on those lists?
No.
Okay, so you can...
Mexico, that's a good question. Canada is not on that list. So you can imagine what's happening now.
Uh-oh.
So a lot of organizations are already turning to Canada because they're scrambling right now to get dogs out before the July 14th ban. So are we, because our one program that we do bring home dogs for the soldiers, we have dogs in waiting, but only 17 right now out of the 30 or so that is in our program will be able to come to the United States in time. But we started to rush, and finding flights for dogs right now is almost impossible. And the prices are skyrocketing as well. So a lot of organizations will be turning to Canada. The UK is another country that adopts out a lot of dogs from Eastern European countries or the Middle East. And Germany is another one. So I would say Germany, the UK, maybe the Netherlands as well, and Canada do a lot of adoption. But safe to say that US would probably be the biggest one.
What's crazy to me, just sidebar, unrelated, but I don't know, to me, the whole airline situation, it just reminds me of the housing situation. I don't know why housing makes it so difficult for people to own pets and airlines make it so difficult for animals to fly when we're such an animal centric culture anymore. It just blows my mind that they're just isolating such a huge population of income potential.
Yeah. It's a good point, but moving back to it, because the way that the rules have been going thus far is that once the airline actually accepts an animal on board, and I was up at 6:30 this morning working with, we had 2 dogs coming in from the Ukraine for an army medic who was there, and they put us through the ringer. We had all the paperwork done weeks in advance. We had to get it redone. At the very last moment, they decided they don't want the dogs on board because they don't believe it's for a U.S. soldier. I had to contact the U.S. soldier, find him, and get his deployment orders. And even that wasn't enough. They wanted proof that he took a flight to Ukraine and back. So that is because the airline has to take that responsibility. Once that dog is brought in and checked in, it's their responsibility for their health, their safety, their well-being until the dog clears customs on the other side. So I think that while it is, for the airlines a lucrative industry, it's also a lot of responsibility and putting a lot of staff to manage that. And if you've been following the news with some airlines, I mean, they've had some issues with, they've put an embargo. A lot of major airlines put an embargo on the transport of dogs because of those issues, just so that they can just reset and recalibrate the way that they are operating. So yeah, there's so many moving pieces.
Okay, so I'm reading and listening at the same time because I wanted to know which countries were on here while we're having this conversation. Mexico's not on the list. China is on the list except for Hong Kong and Taiwan. And I was reading at the top here, beginning July 14th, 2021, there's a temporary suspension, which was what we've been talking about from these countries. And we'll list this on the blog as well. On an extremely limited basis, the CDC has authority to issue advanced written approval. So there is a CDC dog import permit if you would like to bring in a dog from a high risk country. If you would wish to import a dog from a high risk country, you must request advanced written approval from the CDC by emailing, and they give you the email address here, at least 30 business days, 6 weeks before you intend to enter the United States. No CDC dog import permits are issued upon arrival. Dogs that arrive from high-risk countries without advanced written approval will be denied entry and returned to the country of departure.
Yeah. Do you want me to talk a little bit more about those permits?
Yes.
Like how hard are those to get?
Because I mean, this, like reading this from the outside, it sounds like there's hope for something, but it doesn't sound at the same time. Like if you're sending in dogs that don't necessarily have a home right away, or like, what's your take on all of that?
So there won't be any entry for dogs that don't have home right away. So that permit doesn't exist for organizations who are sending dogs to other organizations in the U.S. to find them good families. So they're taken out of the equation right away. In order for you to qualify for one of these permits, you will have to apply 6 weeks in advance. That's a long time. In those 6 weeks as well.
That means, just to like highlight that means that one dog needs 6 weeks of care in the country of origin and 6 weeks of food, water, shelter, support, medical care prior to being able to go anywhere.
Yeah. I would actually add on maybe even an extra 6 to 8 weeks on that, because now you're also, in order to qualify, you will need to get the rabies serology test, the titer test. So all the vaccines, of course, have to be up to date, and it has to be through a CDC approved lab. I don't know if Jason, that is in front of you, but I think there's only 7 approved labs right now worldwide.
It doesn't say right now, no.
So what will happen is those blood samples will have to be shipped. We're talking more days. So the waiting period is going to be very long. There's changes happening every day to what's happening. But they were saying at first that the dog, you had to prove that the dog is not from another country, but is actually originated in the United States and has a rabies certificate from the United States. So the permits will be considered if you're returning back into the United States with your dog.
Okay.
That could be changing. That was when it was first announced. Again,
right. Even if things go smoothly, and we're talking 30 business days, the amount of stuff that can change within those 6 weeks is so substantial. And I think it's easy to think about this like from a personal perspective, like, oh, well, if I needed to get my dog, that sounds feasible, but that's really not what we're talking about as much here. Like, yes, now it is more difficult to bring your fur kids back and forth from these particular countries. But what the impact is desperately going to have is that we don't have the resources or the people that are investing this kind of time into animals without homes.
Right. Yeah. And not even the waiting time and the financial burden that will cause, but we're also talking about the health and well-being of the dog. The longer they're a lot of these dogs will have to be put into a boarding facility or whatnot. And
expensive. It's an expense.
It's an expense, but it's also a health hazard. If there's other dogs around, not just, we're not just talking about rabies, we're talking about other illnesses, even skin conditions and whatnot. We're also talking about socialization. So if these dogs are going to have to be put into boarding for a long time, they're going to lose that. Well, Sylvia, you would know best, the socialization aspect of it, in the demeanor of the dog.
Especially if they're being picked up off the streets as like nearly feral. They need a significant amount of like human interaction, dog, safety. Some of them do need training. A lot of them can be reactive. Like some of these dogs, I've worked with some of these dogs, like they've never been on a leash. They're like 2. They've never been on a leash. I just went hiking with one of my Dogs Without Borders dogs today. He's a rescue from Mexico, which I know is not on the list, but we muzzle trained him and he hikes with 13 dogs, but that doesn't mean he's not yelling. He picked 3 fights today on our hike. So it's like, these are not easy cases, all of them, like it's easy to think like, oh, these puppies, but a lot of these dogs really do need like rehabilitation, training, care. They're unfamiliar with humans. They've been abused by humans. They need to be like reintroduced, desensitized. Like there's so much that gets lost when we're talking like 8 to 10 weeks of boarding in a facility that we don't know. Plus it's going to be overcrowded, overrun, because like you literally throw out a number, 1 million dogs. That is a lot of dogs per capita per month per location. By the way, sidebar, I looked it up. There are 5 labs.
5 labs.
CDC approval.
So they've actually, I think they reduced
1 in China, 1 in France, 1 in Mexico, which you don't even need because they can come in from Mexico, and 1 in the UK and 1 somewhere.
So basically there's 4.
Yes. Basically there's 4 because I don't think France is on the list either.
I don't think it is either.
But there's 1 in France.
Yeah, that's one that we have used in the past. Yeah, it's a big, again, I'm going to say it again, it's a big ripple effect on many, many levels. We are looking at our service members who are deployed overseas for 9 months at a time, and a dog or cat walks into their life on base and changes their whole perception of their deployment, gets them through one of the worst times of their life. And they have befriended these animals like their family, and it reminds them a little bit of home life. We always say, a lot of the soldiers actually tell us, like, I don't know if I saved this dog or this dog saved me. And to have to say you have to leave that dog behind is absolutely devastating. And that's just not something that we are prepared to do. We are getting onto a different topic, forgive me, but we are looking at all other ways to keep our program alive and to not have to turn our U.S. service members away from the ability to bring home their battle buddy. So
we can email the CDC with this and respect and let them know, like, hey, because I read the letter, I think you posted on your Instagram. I read it. It's super respectful. It's like, hey, I just don't agree with this. Is there anything we can do? It's like very respectful, which I think is so accurate. Again, so angry at these people who have ruined this. So angry.
This is Mario Andretti. You know me as a race car driver, but I'm also a Meals on Wheels volunteer. I've raced against the sport's biggest personalities, but I've never met more vibrant, amazing people than the seniors served by Meals on Wheels. You can make a difference by dropping off a hot meal and saying a quick hello. So, America, let's do lunch. Volunteer your lunch break at americaletsdolunch.org.
This message brought to you by Meals on Wheels America and the Ad Council.
People been saying to your friend, get a different face, and posting on their feed, they're super ugly. The things they say to them online are cruel and they're not true. So tell your friend, I'll stand up for you. Don't
someone being bullied online, you can be a witness and make a difference by letting the world know it isn't cool and by letting your friend know you care. Learn more at eyewitnessbullying.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Hope you enjoyed your meal. And I just want to say, he's lucky to have a brother like you.
Lucky? Caring for my brother is far from easy. But he's a part of me, like my arms and legs, so I'll be his. No time for tired. Nothing can disable this love. He needs me, but I'm the lucky one, even though I need help now and then.
If you're caring for a loved one, visit aarp.org/caregiving for care guides and community support for your strength. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
Dear John, I'm leaving. Uncontrolled high blood pressure is serious, and I can quit whenever I want. Why can't we get back to when you checked on me? I don't want to leave, but remember, when I quit, you quit. Sincerely, your heart.
Listen to your heart and don't let it quit on you. High blood pressure can lead to a stroke, heart attack, or death. Get yours to a healthy range today. For help keeping yours at a healthy range, text PRESSURE to 97779. A message from the American Heart Association, the American Stroke Association, and the Ad Council.
WWE superstar Alberto Del Rio. Take one.
Behold the angry giant.
Try it again, Alberto.
Behold the angry giant.
Perfect. Good luck tonight.
Behold the angry giant.
Yay! Read me another one, Dad.
This is WWE superstar Alberto Del Rio. It only takes a moment to make a moment. Take time to be a dad today.
Visit fatherhood.gov. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
It may be hard to believe, but people just like you are already saving money. FeedThePig.org makes it easy. Their simple savings plan teaches you how to start saving without going overboard. So you don't need to sell all your belongings and live in a commune.
These dungarees belong to all of us now, Tom.
You don't need to get a second job as a stuntman.
We need a new stuntman!
You just need FeedThePig.org. Don't get left behind. Get tips and tools at FeedThePig.org. Brought to you by the American Institute of CPAs and the Ad Council.
You're listening to Fenix Media. Listen live and explore more great shows at phoenixmedia.us.
Like, what are some organizations that are overseas that are doing like the spay and neuter work and doing the rabies vaccines and doing that? Like, where are places that, like, if people have the means and they can donate, like, where should they be sending their dollars? Where is it going to have the most impact?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. I mean, we have, again, over 250 active partners around the world, many of, I would say the majority who are on this banned list. One of our biggest partners in Lebanon, Beirut for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, it's called BETA. They have been working with the government for a number of years. They do things so properly. They have over 850 dogs in their care. They rely solely on bringing into the United States. And just to give you an example, they had one dog adopted in the country in the last 4 weeks. So this is mass devastation for them. And so they won't be able to, they're already struggling with the funding. Lebanon has been hit hard in the last year. They've been through an economic crisis. Then they went through the pandemic. Then I don't know if you knew about the big explosion at the port last year.
Yes.
Yeah.
So they have had devastation.
My curiosity, and maybe like this is an opportunity where we can re-educate people, like, because I think that too, most people aren't going to actually take the time to read the ban and why it exists. I think that maybe a lot of people might be making assumptions about why this ban exists, and it could be discouraging them from wanting to even look at adopting a dog from another country because they might not understand why these dogs are not allowed to come in. Like, they may think it has something to do with COVID. So maybe, like, if we can just take a second to like re-educate and really help people understand, like, this is really a rabies issue, like at its core. And it's really like it's a mismanagement of information issue that the CDC is trying to get across. So like, if it's in your heart and you do want to adopt, like, and there will be processes in place. Like, it's not a safety issue, as I feel like there might be a population of people who are reading this ban and are now just turned off by the idea of getting a dog from one of these countries.
Right. Yeah. And again, I think it's going to be that way. That's for a number of years, hopefully not a number of years, but it's going to have a lasting
ripple
for a long time. It's a very good point. I think that, excuse me, that most of the time when, of course, we have information coming at us at lightning speeds these days through social media, the news, every which direction, that I think the average time somebody spends on any information piece is about 9 seconds. So they'll see the highlights, danger, dogs, US, right? And I think that's a very valid point.
113 countries. No, not allowed.
Right.
I don't think, if you're not taking the time, it could cause some anxiety for somebody.
Right. And, we don't want
to look differently now at the dogs who are even already here in these organizations trying to find homes. Like, if they see that the dog originated from one of these countries, it might make them feel like they don't want to take that dog on even.
There's certainly going to be a lot of scrutiny. I agree with you. I think people are going to meet a dog in the US who is adopted from the Middle East somewhere and say, oh, well, that country was on the ban list. Therefore, that country did, it's going to be looked at as a whole. That country did something bad. And that's not the case at all. So I do agree. This is the time to educate and then keep re-educating.
Yeah. And I think, just read everything. Don't make assumptions. To any of our listeners out there who were confused as to what the ban entailed and what it actually, no pun intended, what it actually, is about. If the dogs are here, they're safe. If they have records, those records are real. It's about, do your due diligence. I tell all my clients, it doesn't matter if you got your puppy from a breeder in a farm in Montana or you adopted a dog that just came in from Thailand. You should have a vet visit within 72 hours to check that dog from everything, like boots to bonnet, from their fecal. I always tell my clients, you have to get a fecal. You got to know what's going on in the body of your animal. And it's not just for anyone who was wondering, it's not just dogs from other countries. I've seen so many sick puppies right here. They just got off the phone with my coworker who's crying because her puppy's been battling with Giardia for over a month now. And he was born here in sunny Los Angeles. So it's this disease is not exclusive.
Right.
It's not exclusive to any particular area or zone. I think we unfortunately saw a lot of this kind of hate spring about with certain cultures with the pandemic and just how isolated we made certain cultures feel. And I just would hate to see that happening to the animals that are on these countries that are on this ban. That's not what's going on, guys.
Yeah.
Lori, does this really, I don't want to say this poorly, but does this really track back to low quality of standard organizations that were just trying to force feed a supply and demand issue here in the United States?
Does it come down to that? I wouldn't hold as that. I think that a lot of organizations always try to do the right thing. I think we're talking about sometimes it's just even the efficacy of a vaccine. In certain countries, they don't have the same vaccines that we have access to. And so I've been
now with the pandemic even.
Right.
Well, I'm trying to figure out what the trigger was. That always kind of fills in gaps in my storytelling ability and what happened and why now. And there's is it just super unfortunate timing that this is happening at the same exact time that we're hearing so much from the CDC on our own human behalf? Is it there has to be certain ties, to something that kind of triggered this? Because I mean, I've never heard of a, has this happened before? I guess is another question. Has there been these year-long plus bans for rabies?
There was a ban that was issued in, I believe it was 2015 or 2016 out of Egypt, where 2 dogs arrived into the United States that tested positive for rabies. So they had put, the CDC had put a ban on any importation of dogs from Egypt, and they said it was going to last a year. That ban is still in effect, unfortunately. They never lifted it. So it had happened. We had some soldiers who were deployed to Egypt, and they were required to apply for a special permit. That's the other thing. It's the person who owns the dog who applies for the permit. We are not going to have any say. We're not going to be able to be privy to looking at that permit. It has to be completely with the person who's applying. In our case, for our program, it would be the soldier. So, to backtrack and answer your question, I think that is it just a matter of people knowing this and falsifying documents for either, to get money or just to get as many animals out of the country? I don't think that's straight across the board like that. I think there's certain countries that don't have the same efficacy on the vaccines. Maybe they were shipped in not the right temperature controlled container. So the serology test is really the answer to this. And I think, of course, we're also dealing with a lot of organizations and who are quite reputable, but who see this day in, day out, 7 days a week, the cruelty, the disease, the starvation, everything on the street, and it's very overwhelming. And there's a high level of burnout in animal welfare work, especially around, across the globe. And so given the fact that this last year, everybody was at home in the United States and wanted a dog, they rushed to it. And there are organizations, and I don't know who those are, and I applaud the CDC for not reporting who those are, not putting any names out, who did probably, I don't know if they falsified the documents, but maybe changed the date, and that unfortunately ruined it for all the responsible owners and organizations.
Do you know what the big difference is between, so you mentioned the one with Egypt, and it hasn't been lifted since, but that was a single country. And like now we're dealing like from wherever we were at, like, I don't want to say zero, because obviously there was Egypt. Are there other countries that were already on this like ban that we wouldn't have been able to bring animals in from, or dogs?
No, Egypt was the one that I know.
So to go from 1 to 113, it's not like even this is centralized in a particular area. Like, hey, these countries, clustered here. Like,
it's a lot.
Like that's where like I'm trying to wrap my brain around. I mean, the logical nature of how we went from 1 to 113, and that makes any sense. And again, like, I'm not trying to tell the CDC how to do their job. I think they've got enough people doing that right now as is. I'm just trying to get a basic understanding so that moving forward, at least the people in our audience can like, this is how we can try and keep something like this from happening again. This is how we can make an impact, when it is happening now, like all of these different things.
I think what happened, if I had to take an educated guess, is that, they saw some paperwork that wasn't done right from maybe a handful of countries, maybe a dozen countries. And then they started looking at their records on where the vast majority of the dogs were coming from around the world. And they said, well, if it's coming from here, it's coming from there. Let's create a list of all the countries around the world that import the most dogs into the country, and let's press pause on them. And I think, and it's, for lack of better words, I agree. It's overwhelming from going from 1 to 113.
Doesn't make sense to me.
Could have went to like 10.
Yeah.
Not to be funny, but seriously.
Well, we would like to see just, instead of the ban and putting the ban on countries, working with strict regulations and even as a whole, as an agency or organization, you be required to apply for a special permit to be able to even consider bringing in dogs in the future, even with this, so like you have to be awarded a license to be able to import dogs. But for now, unfortunately, the ban is going to be in effect no matter how much pushback there has been over the last couple of weeks. It will begin on July 14th.
So this isn't going to be something that's like a rolling, like checking in every once in a while. Like, okay, so we're going to make sure that we're testing here or watching numbers there. Like what we're all used to across the world now. Like we're watching, the COVID levels go up and down in a particular area. Like there's nothing like that for the next year with hopes of like, well, if the numbers drop below this, or we meet this criteria in the next 3 months, then the ban would be lifted. Like this is just going to be a hard stamp in the ground, and we need to have it fixed by the time it's over.
I don't think so. I think that there are a lot of discussions that we're having, again, with not directly with the CDC, but with our partners who do import, who have a direct relationship with the CDC. I don't think that this is what they, this is like, okay, let's punish everybody. This is not what they want to do for solutions. And they did say if things get streamlined, things get better, then, potentially it can get overturned, or maybe there'll be a new mandate, like I just said, for organizations to have to apply. I don't know. This is all up in the air right now.
Ultimately, it's like you said in the beginning, it's like the CDC is not out to get everybody. This sucks and it's really painful. And I think it's probably opening a lot of people's eyes as to maybe what is happening with the importation of these animals. I've learned a lot in this conversation too about what's going on. And a lot of it is absolutely unacceptable.
Most of my family, they never graduated high school, so I'm trying to break that barrier. My daughter, Brooklyn, was also a motivation for me to go back to school. Every day after work, went straight to school, and it paid off.
At age 26, Kareem finished his high school diploma.
I could not have done it alone. I see the future is really bright for me.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
So I'm a cat, and I just moved in with this new human, and she's got this little toy she's always playing with, all day long. Tap, 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 bloop, bloop. She can't put it down. There it is. Oh, and get this. She even talks to it. Last week, she asked it for Chinese, and guess what? Egg rolls showed up. Like magic. Humans have cool toys.
A person is the best thing to happen to a shelter pet. Be that person. Adopt. Brought to you by the Ad Council and the ShelterPetProject.org.
What if I told you that a tornado was going to happen tomorrow, right where you live? That it would touch down at exactly 3:17 p.m., and I told you the exact path it would take. You would, of course, prepare. You would talk with your loved ones, and you'd make a plan today. It's true, I can't tell you a tornado will strike tomorrow, but shouldn't you have a plan anyway? Go to ready.gov/communicate and make your emergency plan today. Don't wait. Communicate. Brought to you by FEMA and the Ad Council.
Allison is perfect. I mean, she'd never tell you that. She's humble and perfect. She likes everyone. She even likes her untidy roommate's weird guinea pig. Allison, wait, are you texting and driving? Allison, no. That's the exact opposite of what I was just saying about you. Why, Allison? Why? Texting and driving makes good people look bad. Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
I'm Paul George of the Indiana Pacers. When I was 6, my days were spent playing basketball. When I was 6, my dream was to make it to the NBA. When I was 6, my mom had a stroke. So I want you to learn to spot a stroke fast. F-A-S-T. F, face drooping. A, arm weakness. S, speech difficulty. T, time to call 911. I'm Paul George. Spot a stroke fast. Visit strokeassociation.org. Brought to you by the American Stroke Association and the Ad Council.
My name is Lola Silvestri, and I'm going to be 95 this year.
I was very independent. I fell and I had to have Meals on Wheels. America, let's do lunch.
1 in 6 seniors faces the threat of hunger, and millions more live in isolation. Drop off a hot meal and say a quick hello. Volunteer for Meals on Wheels by donating your lunch break at americaletsdolunch.org. This message brought to you by Meals on Wheels America and the Ad Council.
You're listening to Fenix Media. Listen live and explore more great shows at phoenixmedia.us.
Dogs needing to be turned around and sent back after a flight from like the other side of the world is totally inappropriate, borderline animal cruelty, you know? So it is a problem. Like, there is a problem. And I think that this was a solution. Do I agree that it's like the best solution? No, but it is a solution. And I think now it's really up to, you know, unfortunately, organizations like yours to kind of like champion for better treatment of the animals that are being imported, better protection for these animals that are being imported, and systems that actually function for these animals that are being imported, and for the people who are here on the other side waiting for their animal to be imported, you know? Because I just think about your soldiers, it would be horrifying if they were waiting for their beloved dog to come and then it got sent back, and then because of a paperwork error. So I definitely can see where there's room for improvement. And
well, let me because
there's a lot of insane.
Tell me if my brain just put this together correctly, because I was looking on the website and I'm listening to this conversation, all this stuff. And from what I'm gathering, that this is not, because this will also, if I'm correct, this is in benefit of the stigma against the rescue animals. So this doesn't have as much to do with the animals as much as it has to do with the process. And to me, it sounds like there has been a ban that has been put on the process, not on the animals. Now, these 113 countries, they weren't flagged earlier this month in June. These 113 countries have been on a list from the CDC for a set amount of time as high-risk countries, not just since June. It's not like, what I'm saying is in June, they didn't say, hey, these are the 113 countries that we should be worried about. It is in the recent history, we have these 113 countries that are considered high risk. For those 113 countries, we have this current process to be able to import those dogs. And the CDC has now said that process is no longer stringent enough to allow the importation of dogs from those 113 countries. So really what they've said is, we've stopped the importation through this system. And unfortunately, these 113 countries have to go through it. And like, if I'm correct on that, and you're kind of nodding your head, Lori, but if I'm correct on that, this is not a ban on the dogs. Like, it's being spun as a ban on the dogs, but there's nothing wrong with these dogs. These dogs just happen to have to go through this system. The CDC has identified that this system is broken, and you have a year to get it fixed. And if you don't get it fixed in the next year, then the ban is going to continue until that is fixed. So really what we need to do is that system needs to be fixed, and then the ban will then be lifted off of those 113 countries, not the dogs from those countries. Like, does that all, am I right?
If I was writing a paper about this, that would be my conclusion right there.
Because that makes sense to me on how we went from 1 to 113. Because it doesn't have to do with like, oh my God, there's all these infected dogs coming in from all of these random countries. That's not it. It's that these were already considered high risk. And if there would have been other random countries that were on that list or not on that list, they just happened. That's just how it fell.
Yeah. And I think that's a very, very important message to get out, that there's nothing wrong with these dogs. It's the system that is broken, and that's a system that needs to be fixed. And we need to come together to try to work together to create that solution. And we are, and there are many organizations who are coming together to work together, and there are many organizations who have direct communication with congressmen and women as well, who are not in support of the ban as well, so who will be speaking on behalf of the organizations and the dogs on a congressional.
At the end of the day, they're the ones ultimately paying this price.
Yeah.
So we can hold out some hope that somewhere along the line, somebody could potentially step in, strong arm things and be like, look, this is a little excessive. Why don't we put something into place like, okay, we're going to let you know that if this isn't fixed in the next year, then we're going to start the ban, as opposed to just surprise ban. Now you got to figure it out.
Yeah. Let's go back to like how we started this conversation with the organizations and the people who work around the world. This is their hope. And I think that we need to have that hope here too. And
can we write a letter? Can we write to our Congress people and say, hey, this is really important to me. Can we figure out a solution? Can we prioritize this?
Absolutely. Again, respectively, we're encouraging our followers to respectively write to their Congress offices in their state. And from what I've already received back in information, they're listening. And a lot of these men and women are big animal lovers too. So yeah, that's another encouragement for sure.
Okay.
So don't lose hope.
Write a letter to the CDC.
Okay.
We're not.
What happened?
Said don't lose hope.
No. Write a letter to your congressperson. Yeah. Write a respectful letter to the CDC. Donate to these organizations that are on the ground, caring for these animals actively. Just because they can't come here, I mean, especially because they can't come here, they need support, they need care, they need housing, they need food. So don't sleep on them. There's nothing wrong with these animals. They still need love. They still need saving. They just can't come here. But that doesn't mean that we need to give up on them where they are,
I love that message. I think it's really important for everybody to know that these are the voiceless. The dogs can't speak for themselves, but all of us can speak for them, and all of us can make a difference.
They didn't do anything wrong, you guys.
They didn't do anything wrong.
They still need help. They're still there. There are still people there trying to help them. Like, just because this ban exists doesn't mean that, like, all of a sudden everyone has stopped helping dogs in China. Everyone has just stopped rescuing stray dogs off the street in, Croatia. Like, that's not what's going on. Like, these people are still there. They're still doing it. They're still in Baghdad. They're still in Moscow. They're still collecting these animals and helping them and saving them. They still need support.
These organizations need more support than ever. You're right.
Support and vaccines and enough money to get their paperwork done correctly so that they can come here. Even more so. They need microchips. They're gonna need this medical care. So I think we'll put a bunch of stuff in the show notes. I think Lori has a list of absolutely reputable organizations that are doing the work correctly, that we can, send, if you have it, that you can send to them and help with the care of an animal. It doesn't take a lot of money to feed a dog in other countries for 6 to 8 weeks. Yeah, if we're getting those permits done. Jason?
Yeah.
On that?
Yeah. I love all of it. I mean, I was already just thinking about the $1 a day program that SPCAI was doing last time.
Right. Yes. Thank you for remembering. Yes. 100% of our online fundraising will be for these shelters, will be going directly to these shelters. So anybody can keep track of what we're doing and be alerted to specific organizations who really, really need extra help. We're working on emergency funding for a lot of the NGOs right now.
What about, how can we support the groups that are trying to put the new system in place so that can be done as quickly and efficiently as possible?
That will roll out in the next couple of weeks. You're going to hear about a coalition that will be forming amongst many organizations.
Love a coalition.
Pardon?
I said I love a good coalition. People working together.
Yeah, this is, the one, if I may say, beautiful thing that is coming from this is that I use this term quite often. Like-minded individuals are coming together around the world and holding hands across the world. And it's quite a humbling thing to be part of, to witness, to have a voice, and to work collectively. And that's what we need to keep doing. And that's not just organizations. That's everybody who has a voice. That's every single person who's listening to this or reading even the caption that you'll put in the post. Everybody can come together and hold hands together for these animals and the people who help the animals.
Well, we'll keep doing what we can do. And I think it's important not to forget, like it'll be a long year for us, but it's going to be a longer year for a lot of other people.
Dogs.
And not letting this just kind of go by the wayside and forget about it. And when the band's over, being ready to try and help pick up that slack as much as possible.
Thank you. Thank you for being part of this.
Thank you so much again for just coming back and sharing your experience and, your absolute love and heart for these animals. And they're so lucky to have you advocating in their corner. You little gem, you.
Don't make me cry on camera. I think you made me do that last time.
Well, I'm surprised that Sylvia's held on this long. Either that or I just couldn't tell with her the camera going on there.
It's been difficult.
It's truly, truly an honor to speak with you both. I love sitting and looking at your faces and discussing animal welfare issues with you. And thank you so very much for having me on the show, and of course being a representative for our organization, SPCAI International. It really, really means a lot to all of us.
We're going to rush this right out. So this will go live on Tuesday. So I wanted to get it up ASAP. We're skipping the dog dad joke on this one. I didn't think it was quite appropriate.
Lori's like, it was the one thing I wanted.
I know.
No one said that. Said no one ever.
What are you talking about? Everybody was looking forward to that.
It's like when you get to the bottom of, what was it? Those the caramel pink popcorn boxes. I'm aging myself, and you find the surprise at the bottom. That was like the
Cracker Jack box.
What was it?
Yeah, Cracker Jack. Now they just do like these weird little things of paper. Super disappointing.
Super disappointing.
Oh man, I got some for the kids a little while ago, and I was like, dude, it basically looked like you tear it open, it looks like a stamp. And Kemper's like, what is this? I was like, dude, it used to be a cool toy. Now it's.
I guess they're too worried. I know that Kinder Surprise chocolates are banned in the US, but they're not banned in Canada. But I think children were just swallowing the toy. Probably something similar.
But we'll have you back on again soon to figure out what's going on and how things are going on that front, and making some progress and the impact that people are having and all that stuff.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
And if there's anything that you need to use us for, like you need to hop on the show again real quick, reach out and say, we got to get something out there. We want to be able to make that kind of impact anytime that we possibly can.
That would be great. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Lori.
Okay. So yeah, no dog joke on this one, but I want to thank everybody for taking the time to sit and listen and learn. I really want to take a moment and just emphatically thank Lori for spending some time with us and explaining this, so that I know you and I both really learned a lot from this
so much
and understand what's going on.
I didn't understand. I felt so angry, and I think that my anger was misdirected, like so many people. So I just feel like I feel empowered now. Like I feel hopeful.
Yeah.
So I'm so glad we did this. I hope that our listeners got as much out of it as I did.
Yep. Make sure to subscribe. Make sure to go check things out. Make sure this is going to be the one time I normally we say, hey, share and tell your friends. But on this one, like, this isn't about us at all. Like, get this out. Make sure that the people in your animal circles and dog circles, especially, are listening to this so that they know what's going on with the CDC. This is going to be something that sticks around for the next year, it sounds like. So we need to stick with it. We need to understand what's going on. We need to know what we can do to avoid it moving forward.
Accountable.
So please share this. Even if you're just taking a clip, take your notes, get it out there, so that we don't have people that are pointing the anger in the wrong direction. So, all right, until next time, we will we'll talk to you later. Bye.